The Demons from Outer Space is back. It's episode 105, and we are back to talk about some X-Men movies with you today. Two in a row this time, not just the usual one. We watched two of the absolute most garbage X-Men movies. Well, here's how it breaks down for me. One that's just kind of disappointing, and then one that's just really, just painfully mediocre.
Yeah, public opinion hasn't been kind to the one you're talking about. But in retrospect, I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be.
What am I talking about, D? Give the details.
You're talking about, well, anybody who's been keeping up with these reviews knows what the fuck we're talking about. We're talking about X3, The Last Stand. And in a few minutes, we'll also be talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine. We thought we'd get all this shit out of the way in one go. But the thing about X3 is that it's not all shit. I mean, there's a point in the movie where it starts to go downhill, but there's a lot of good shit in it, and I think maybe another draft would have been good. I think it in a way it almost feels like there are two movies going on, and either one of them would be good on their own, but slapped together it comes across kind of awkward.
I didn't have that impression. What were the two movies that you thought you were watching?
Well, on the one hand, you have the plot about the cure, the mutant cure, and that is an X-Men movie unto itself. That's super interesting, and it has a lot kind of political discussion to be had. And then on the other hand, you have the whole Phoenix thing, which honestly is not executed very well. I would almost rather...
It's such a non-entity in the movie. It really is the equivalent of Venom and Spider-Man 3 in that. But even less so, because it doesn't have the interaction with... Because, Venom, obviously, the symbiote interacts with Spider-Man early on. And so at least it's developed in that way. But you don't have anything like that in X3. And the Phoenix is just a non-entity in this movie.
Exactly. I feel like either of those plot lines on their own could make really good X-Men movies, but done together, neither of them are really executed to their fullest potential here. And and one of them is pulled off much better than the other, I think.
I think The Cure is done pretty well. And then I think the Phoenix stuff is really just they don't get into it really. They find Jean Grey dead. They don't really ask too much about where Scott ended up until pretty far in. I was thinking about that. I was like, they found the glasses, so they know something's up. They found Jean Grey's miraculously surviving body. And when Xavier said, because Logan's like, how the fuck is she alive? And he's just like, she has incredible potential, Logan. She wrapped her body in telekinetic energy and it survived. And he's just like, holy shit, what the fuck? I had no idea that was a thing that you people could do. And he's just like, yeah. I can't do that kind of shit, but she can, because she's the strongest mutant I've ever seen.
Actually, surprisingly enough, that is out of the comics. I mean, there was a moment when they thought Jean Grey was dead. It was a lot more dramatic than it was presented in X2. I mean, there was space travel involved. But there was a moment when
she got hit by a
was...
spaceship when she was crossing a space highway.
But it was a terrible traffic accident. If only Gamera were there. But
if only the kids from Gamera were there, they would have stopped it.
But there was a moment in the comics where you think she's dead, and then she comes back later and she's the Phoenix. The fuck do you survive? And there's some bullshit about telekinetic and what have you. That is one note about this, is that obviously the Phoenix is not even remotely the same thing that it was in the comics. But I'm kind of okay with that, just because they had to set it up ahead of time, and there was no space travel in the other two movies. So if they had tried to introduce all this space shit in this movie, it would have come off a little weird. If they wanted to do traditional,
it still comes
Phoenix,
off very weird.
Yeah, if they'd wanted to do traditional Phoenix, then X2 would have had to been them going into space and encountering the Shi'ar and all that bullshit.
I get what they thought that they did, and from the conceptual level, this version of the Phoenix would have been fine if they would have done something with it.
Right.
She just doesn't do anything. She spoilers, obviously, if you haven't seen these movies. She murders Professor Xavier. All of that I was fine with. All of that was really dramatic, when they roll up to Jean Grey's old house, that you see at the beginning, and she's chilling in there, really, really pissed off, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I felt
Like, that was
that
all
moment,
really good. And then she rips Professor Xavier apart, and that all went a little long for me. Like, I had actually sort of, like, I phased out, but by the time she started murdering him, like, that all took way too long. But
that's also
that
to
moment was
me
still incredibly impactful.
that's also to me the point where the movie starts to go downhill. Honestly, yeah.
After that, yeah, totally. Because then she doesn't do anything for the rest of the movie. And there's just this really mediocre climax where the X-Men toss a bunch of Smallville villains around. And then Wolverine goes up to Jean Grey. There's a really bad CGI effect. And then he kills her. That's it.
Yeah.
And I also wasn't convinced that Logan could kill her.
Well, the idea is that because of his regenerative ability, he's the only one who can really get close enough when she's like throwing out her psionic waves.
Yeah,
And then once you're up close to her,
because they establish she can rip people apart. But I mean, if you look at Wolverine in the comics, there's no way he should be able to do this. They've turned him into this just like unkillable just organism in this continuity that he was not in the comics. Like, I was literally just reading Weapon X before we got on this call. I've been reading through that. That's mad long, by the way. Have you read that?
Yeah,
it's mad long. And
I have a book version of Weapon X. It's actually pretty good.
I should read that, but because this is just the original graphic novel, it's mad good. It's kind of like if Michael Crichton wrote a superhero origin. It's fascinating.
Yeah, the novelized version that I have is it's like what I wish X-Men Origins had been, but now I'm getting ahead of myself.
We'll get there, son. But what I was saying was that I don't buy that. I don't buy that what they explain as the reason is for Logan being able to kill Jean Grey. I didn't buy that. She should have been able to rip him apart to the point where he couldn't heal.
It's a combination of elements. Wolverine is a little bit tougher in this movie than he is in your typical comic book. Now, that obviously varies depending on who's writing him.
Yeah, obviously I'm comparing it to really early stuff. Like, I also read the Frank Miller miniseries where it's in Japan. Like, obviously he's not half as durable as he is even in X-Men 1.
It's a good thing you read that, because eventually we'll be getting around to the movie based on that. Loosely based, but
yeah, how faithful are the characters the same? Like, do they do Asano? Do they do the girl that he's going after?
It's been too long since I've read that comic for me to tell you with any certainty.
Have you read the actual comic of that, or did you read a fucking book version of it? You fucking nerd.
I have read the comic of it, but it's been a long time. Like, I read that in school. Like, I don't even.
I also recently read Wolverine versus Hulk, the Ultimate version. I haven't read the original comic yet because apparently it's really old and really weird. But I haven't read that. I have read the Ultimate version. It's kind of interesting. It's written by Damon Lindelof, the guy who wrote Lost, and he also wrote Star Trek Into Darkness. Not somebody I'm a big fan of, but it's kind of interesting because the Ultimate version of Hulk is sort of what you exactly need with a dark version. It's pretty spot on. And Logan's pretty cool too, but it's way too long. Anyway, so back to X3.
What I was saying is,
so you're right. You had a point. Go ahead.
It's a combination of them making Wolverine tougher than he was in the comics. Again, depending on who's writing him at the time, that's obviously a factor with any of these characters. But also, Phoenix's powers are scaled back a little in this movie, which is saying something, because they make a big fucking deal out of her in this movie. But yeah, I mean, in the comics, she's like this crazy cosmic entity, this like fucking fiery space bird thing that like attaches itself to Jean Grey, and like in this, it's just her hidden potential, and like it's developed its own personality.
It's that shit that Gohan got unlocked when Guru put his hand on his head.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like imagine if something happened to Goku and suddenly he became Kakarot again, and like all of his Saiyan programming came back.
Yeah, no, that's cool. No, I got that. I enjoyed that. Like, I had no problem with the fact that they changed the origin, because the only exposure I have to the Dark Phoenix saga proper is the cartoon, which I saw when I was a kid, and I don't really remember it all. And all I remember is at one point, Jean Grey puts her old costume on, like the old Marvel girl costume. And all the X-Men, like, because they don't really trust her, because she, like, did some fucked up shit, and they all just kind of look at her like, oh, don't look at you trying too hard. I always like that. So she doesn't get to do that, and that's because she dies. We weren't really satisfied with her death at the end of X2, were we? Because I remember complaining about that.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember my issue with it was, A, it didn't look good, and I didn't think it was necessary.
well, anybody who's familiar with the comics kind of watches that movie and knows, Singer's setting up Phoenix. That's what he's doing here.
Well, there's no problem with that. I mean, like, think of the ending of the first Captain America movie. Like, that's obviously just done to set up the Avengers. Like, there's no issue with just... I have no problem with what some people refer to as forced comic book origin syndrome, because I like the comics and I want to see it done in live action. As long as it's just sort of satisfying when we get there.
Right.
But it wasn't... It definitely wasn't satisfying in this instance, was it?
I, for one, don't need to see a carbon copy of the comic on screen. I mean, a lot of people want that, and I'm like, just read the fucking book again. But
yeah, no, I don't want that either. Like, think of like the new Thor movie we're getting. That's going to be like nothing like the comics it's named after and inspired by. But it looks like it's going to take some really cool elements from them.
Well, Logan is very different from Old Man Logan.
That's another great example, and that movie is fucking dope. Yeah.
I don't even know if you could do Old Man Logan the way it is on the page in a movie. It's too out there.
They can't now. But I mean, you fucking, if they get all the rights to everything, why not? I mean, the more out there, the better, man. Like, especially right now where comic book movies are the shit, make it as out there as you can. I'm hoping Infinity War, this Avengers movie, like, they use the fact that these movies will make $1 billion regardless of what's in them, to just make something really weird. Like, because I want something that's in space constantly and weird and just out there.
Because you'd have to do that thing where, like, Bruce Banner has gotten, like, super old and crazy, and he's got, like, all these inbred kids that, like...
Yeah, I don't want that, because I don't really like that.
The fucking end of the movie would be Old Man Logan fighting...
I guess I do like that. I don't know, how did you... We're talking about Old Man
deranged
Logan.
Mark Ruffalo, can you imagine?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with that, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, but they wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be canon. Like, see, here's the thing. I have no problem with it because it's its own thing. Like, you wouldn't do it as like a sequel to everything they've done. You would do it as like, oh, this is its own thing. Like, that's why Logan works, because it works beautifully as a standalone film. That's why Logan is so great.
Matter anymore anyway, because Fox has fucked up the continuity so bad, and they recognize that. They kind of pointed at that in Deadpool and used it for comedy, but like the timeline of these movies makes no fucking sense. Like right now it's all pretty much still consistent. X's 1 through 3 and even Origins, with the exception of Sabretooth, work pretty well together, but like you get into First Class and that's an amazing movie, but man, the continuity just gets
X-Men Origins always bothered me because it feels like a modern day origin for Wolverine. Like, it feels like they try to redo his origin for the present day and make him like a modern day superhero in 2009 as opposed to setting up the 2000 version. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't feel like a prequel to that to me.
No, because it should be taking...
They set up a whole bunch of shit, but it feels like it's just set now.
Yeah, that is a problem. They get better at that with the other X-Men movies that are period pieces. But
what else did you want to say about Last Stand?
Well, first of all, the good things. I fucking love the entire Cure plot is just really good. Like, I wish that was the entire movie, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I really like that Angel's dad is doing that. That's nice. That's really interesting. Angel is shit in this movie, though. Wow, that was like, he was garbage.
Problem is he doesn't really have anything to do. He's in 3 scenes, or 4 if you count the little kid scene of him at the beginning.
And every time he shows up, he's just awkward and weird, and I don't like him.
Okay, he's on 5. He's in 5 scenes if you count that shot of him like flying around at the end, but that's part of the wrapping up montage. Yeah, sadly, Angel never gets his due. Not even. I don't
think they made the effect look good either.
No, it's also 2005, so things have progressed. The Sentinel and the Danger Room.
You know what it looks like?
Weird.
Yeah, you know what it looks like to me though. Well, they don't even show it. They go for like a Godzilla 2014 thing where they sort of imply it's there, and then Wolverine gets thrown off screen, cuts its head off, and then you see the head.
Yeah.
Like, it's super lame.
But I wish that the entire movie was just the Cure business, because that's super interesting.
Totally, I'm with you. And Beast's role in that? Oh, great!
The 2 best parts of the Cure storyline are Beast and Rogue. Those 2 really sell it.
She has a really solid, subtle little arc in there, yeah.
Yeah, and she winds up, taking the Cure and for good fucking reason. Like I would have, like,
Iceman's an asshole, by the way.
Why?
The bit where he freezes the little puddle, not the little puddle, the fucking the fountain, and he takes Kitty Pryde skating. He's a dick because yes, like that's nice to Kitty Pryde, but he should be smarter than to think that if he does that, his girlfriend's not going to be jealous. Like, he totally deserves everything he gets for that. Like, yeah, sure, it was very sweet. But you're totally hitting on that girl, you asshole. And I get that you're all mad at your girlfriend for wanting to not be a mutant anymore, but you're also a dick. Because her power, sucks compared to all y'all's power.
I think the idea is that they're kind of on the outs at that moment, but the movie doesn't really sell that. It just seems like they've had an argument.
They haven't broken up, though, yet.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
He needs to not be a pussy then and break up with her.
That's what I'm saying. I'll tell you who I don't really like in this movie. Except when she's kicking ass, but in terms of her part in the whole cure narrative, yeah, Storm is a complete fucking cunt in this movie.
I like her as conceptually. I like her as the idea of like filling in Xavier's role. Like that makes sense from a conceptual level, but
the only thing about it that irritates me is her stance on the cure when it comes to Rogue.
Oh yeah, everybody makes fun of that because it's insane.
Because look, Storm is supposed to represent the extreme side of the anti-cure argument on the X-Men team. You know, she's the closest to Magneto politically when it comes to this, and I get that. But at the same time, I mean, she has that line where she's like, "There's nothing wrong with us," and I'm like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you." But Rogue,
yeah, that's the thing with the whole mutant business. It's a magically, totally insane, impossible range of different kinds of abilities. And some of them don't even count as abilities. They count as just like an ailment, pretty much.
That's the argument that nobody makes in this movie, and I wish somebody would. You know, for some people, being a mutant is like being able to lift cities with your mind. And for other people, it's like, I've got an arm growing out of my ass. Like, nobody needs that.
Yeah. Well, you should learn to accept your arm and your ass as a gift, Dylan.
I mean, nobody. I think that's a good counter argument that somebody should have brought up in the movie. I mean, they didn't have to say arm in the ass, but I mean, Beast kind of did. There was a moment where he's like, "Not all of us can blend in so easily," and I'm like, should have taken that argument a little further because you're onto a thought there.
Yeah, but everybody's accepted Beast. He's been around for a long time. He doesn't have to worry about it. It's Rogue. Rogue is really the one that they point out that really would benefit from it. And even, it's interesting, Leech is the one they get the powers from, and he would kind of probably benefit from it too if he was given that cure himself.
Right. Also, I
wonder if it would work on him. Do you think it would work on him?
It might not. He might be immune just because it comes from him.
Interesting.
He's kind of there's a weird thing at the end of the movie where he's going to the school, and I'm like, okay, I get that from a narrative level, but like, how is he going to go to class with mutants who are trying to learn how to use their powers if being around him causes them
embrace your gift, Leech. My gift is to take away everybody else's gifts. My gift is to be a fucking thief.
If the mansion comes under attack, do they all have to be like, "Hey, Leech, get the fuck out. We gotta fight."
Jesus Christ, like, please run away. If we
go to the
but I guess they could. I guess they could perform a roundhouse special on him and throw him at like a fucking villain and take away his powers. Like if they threw him at Magneto, he would be like, "Oh no, I'm so feeble." Oh, but by the way,
maybe the idea is because the whole point of the school is to learn how to control your powers. Maybe after being there for a while, he'll be able to control when he's blocking other people's abilities. So then it wouldn't be an issue. Like he could just let everybody else use their powers.
What else is he gonna do then? Fucking run around and give moral support and slap the villains who don't have like excessive powers toward his people?
If he was able to control it, then he could turn it on and off. And then like if he went into battle, if he became an X-Men at some point in the future, goes up against fucking Magneto, he just turns on his power and then up, you can't do shit. Can't lift that metal now, can you, bitch?
What is he gonna do when he's not turning people's powers off, though? What is he going to do against human enemies, which they fight quite a bit in this, especially in X2?
That's a good question. His power doesn't really aid much in that arena, so what he would have to do is train in some martial arts, man. Guns
would be problematic for him. Swords would be problematic for him.
Right. He would have to compensate for that by training
He would have to compensate for that by not being an X-Man and like go. He should be like the librarian in the X-Mansion, you know, like.
Well, that's if he becomes an X-Man. I mean, then he's got to go the whole Batman route and like learn all the different martial arts and learn how to kick ass. If he's not doing that,
as a Batman type, he strikes me as a librarian.
If he's not doing that though, then yeah, I mean, he would be a great warden for a mutant prison.
Yes, there you go. Do they have that in the comics? Because, I mean, there's different prisons in Marvel. There's Ravencroft Institute, which is where Carnage and all the symbiotes and all Spider-Man's villains are kept. There's Riker's Island, which is a Rio prison that's got a whole bunch of other Spider-Man and Daredevil villains. But then
in the video game Wolverine's Revenge, there's this place called the Void, which is basically like a prison for dangerous mutants, and I'm pretty sure that comes from the comics.
It sounds like it comes from the comics. There's Prison 42 from Civil War. That's in the Negative Zone. That's Reed Richards' deal. There's the Cube. That's where all the gamma irradiated villains are kept. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway, this is pointless now.
There are
so the
Void.
The Void. They should have put him in the Void.
Yeah. Maybe that's where Magneto's plastic cell was in the last movie.
Oh, there's the plastic prison in X2, which makes a lot of sense. And that was at the end of X1 as well, right?
But that's very specific. Yeah, but that's very specifically a Magneto thing.
Speaking of Magneto, one awesome bit in this is when he gets shot by the cure darts. That's
Ian McKellen.
That's fascinating. Like, oh my god! Like, what's he do after that?
Ian McKellen fucking owns this movie.
Yes, he's given some dog shit material at points. Like, everything he says after Charles dies, I'm like, what the fuck are you even talking about?
I really liked that once Charles was being murdered in front of him, like the friendship angle comes out.
His reaction to that was amazing. And then there's
they don't address that. They don't really address that in the first two movies. But yeah, they're totally friends. And like you.
No, I think they make it pretty clear, especially in X2.
Oh yeah, I guess in the scenes where they're like playing chess with each other and everything, but you don't really get the depths of how much Magneto actually cares about Charles.
No, yeah, I would agree with that certainly. Yes,
especially in that scene where Pyro, who is pretty good in this. You know, he had his arc in the last movie, and now he's just a straight up bad guy. I like it.
Yes, I like that they make him a big deal. Yeah.
But anyway, he has that moment where he's like, I would have killed Professor X myself, and then Magneto stops him and he's like, you fucking cunt.
Yeah, that is one of the best scenes in the movie as well. But I mean just the idea of him becoming human, like that's fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean they get around it at the end of the movie by showing him learning to use his powers again. So
that's fucking lame. That's lame. I don't like that.
So I guess the idea is even if you've been shot by the cure, you can like bring your powers back if you like concentrate hard enough. Because obviously they're not just going to make it to where it wears off after a certain amount of time, because then Rogue's fucked. I think it's probably something that you have to actually try to do. Like he's sitting at that table concentrating on moving the thing.
I don't know. I still like it. I wish it was permanent. I think that's more interesting. Because Dylan, this is the end of this continuity essentially. Everything after this is either a reboot or a prequel. Because even the stuff in Days of Future Past that takes place in the future, it either must be a different continuity or it's like sort of a different version of the events that we see unfold here. Or what I think it is it's a direct sequel to X2. Because the Wolverine is more of like a direct sequel to X2, no? Do they directly reference him murdering her at the end of this movie?
Yes, the Wolverine, that's a big deal in the Wolverine. He's all
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you this much. At the beginning of the movie, he's like fucking living the life of a hermit. He's all fucked up because he had to kill the woman he loves. He's like
they don't really play with that at the end of this movie, interestingly. He seems pretty okay with it, like after everything is said and done.
Yeah, but I mean, but you can only kind of see a shot of him walking outside the X mansion and looking around. I'm pretty sure the idea is that after that he fucks off and goes off.
No, I totally got that sense. That's true.
You catch up with him in the Wolverine, and he looks like he's been on fucking Duck Dynasty. Like, he's got the fucking beard going on, like fucking out in the woods protecting bears and shit. And he's just gone off the deep end, and he has, like, nightmares about Jean Grey. So, like, yeah, it's very definitely...
I never bought their romance, though.
That always seemed pretty one-sided. I think once she comes back from the dead as the Phoenix, she's sort of playing him at that point.
Totally. That's obviously the idea. And he even sees that.
Yeah, it's he's in love with her. She's not really in love with him. The Phoenix just sort of takes advantage of his feelings.
Yeah, okay. Right. So I guess it's fine. I don't know, man. I
The
just
person she's in love with God.
more than anything, here's my problem. Here's my general issue with these movies that I think X-Men Origins Wolverine has strives that I think this movie really shows in the elements that we've been talking about the most that are problematic. These movies cannot decide whether they are straight up superhero movies or they are these dark sort of science fiction mutant stories. And I get that the comics are both, but they are not both in the same way that the comics are able to make work. Because that works in the comics because they take that idea of the mutant gene and they put it into a superhero universe. Like, that is a world that had superheroes in it, like while mutants were a thing. Like, there were mutants prior to the superhero, movement that were not superheroes. Mutants became superheroes in the Marvel Universe after superheroes became a thing. In this, they really struggle to have those sort of overarching narrative tropes not only make sense, but also just feel relevant and balanced out with all the dark mutant stuff in a way that makes sense. And I'm not saying all the time, I'm not saying that these shouldn't be superhero movies at all, no. I'm just saying that these movies feel awkward about it.
Yeah,
And I think that this one more than the other two.
I think that's a product of when the franchise started. We talked about this when we reviewed the first movie. It came out in this weird period where, like, superhero movies weren't really a big enterprise yet. I mean, you'd had a few franchises that had taken off. But, like, X-Men was, like, taking a thing that mostly only comic book nerds or people who watched the cartoon knew about and, like, made it a big thing. You know what I mean? Like, it was the first time dipping our toes into comic book movies that weren't about, like, one of the big characters. It's not Batman or Superman, but it's this other property that the fans really like. And we talked about that when we reviewed X1. It's like the studio wasn't really confident in that movie because they didn't really know how it was going to do, and then it kind of succeeded, and they're like, keep doing that, and which that's another problem I think with this movie is that you can definitely tell that Bryan Singer is no longer at the helm. And that becomes a problem because it still looks like the universe he established. The story is going in the direction that I think he was probably telegraphing.
Well, he was still a producer on this now.
I'm not sure actually, but anyway, the story's still going in that direction. It still looks like the universe he established, but there's just a different guy at the helm, so there's like a different feel that comes through, And it creates this weird thing where it doesn't really feel. They market this as like the original X-Men trilogy, but it doesn't really feel like a trilogy in that way. It feels like two movies that are connected, and then this one other kind of weird movie that came afterwards.
I don't agree. I feel like it feels pretty consistent with the other two, and that in most of the ways. I just feel like it's just a bad one, not even that bad. It just kind of peters out towards the end. Like, it feels like exactly the same world to me. Well, okay. There are a few things that maybe stick out as not feeling like. I feel like Beast comes out of nowhere, sadly. Where has he been? That's one massive problem that is not addressed.
The idea has always been that the X-Men were a thing before Wolverine ran into them in the first movie.
Oh, of course. But why hasn't he been in the public consciousness? No, why haven't we been aware of him? Or why hasn't he interacted with any of the stuff that's gone on in the other two movies? Because those were pretty big deals. So I would assume he would get involved.
It's actually one of the nice things about First Class is that we get to see Beast being an X-Man back in the day. Now it doesn't really make sense because there's a whole lot of continuity stuff that's wrong. But hey, it's X-Men movies. But yeah, he kind of comes out of nowhere. There's no Nightcrawler. That's pretty noticeable after the impact he made in the last movie. I mean, everybody loves Alan.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there's no Nightcrawler here. I don't remember what the reason was behind that either. I don't know if it was just Alan Cummings didn't want to come back or what happened.
He came to the last time.
But I imagine he's probably off in a church somewhere.
Probably praying. Bitch.
That would have been interesting. I feel like he would have been the only other character in the X-Men camp other than Rogue that would have been like, yeah, let's get this cure, guys. So they maybe should have had him in there. Another thing that's really weird is Scott's death. It's kind of vague and like confusing. Like, I think the idea is supposed to be that she kills him accidentally because she's not really sure how to control her new
Oh
power.
no, that struck me as very intentional.
But like, why though?
I don't know, but it struck me as very intentional. To get the
Either
X-Men to come to her?
either it was intentional. Well, she didn't need to do that to do that. She could just reach out and
But that's
communicate
what
with.
did it, though.
Yeah, but all she would have had to do, though, is reach out and communicate with Charles telepathically.
You're absolutely right, but she did that by murdering Scott, so that was what the movie thought it had to do. So they should have written a different scenario. I would have to agree.
It's one of two things. Either it was just, oh, I can't control my powers and I accidentally blew up Scott, because then later on they are bringing up like, you killed Scott. She's like, no, don't talk about that. Like, either it's that and it just wasn't explained very well, or it was supposed to be intentional and that makes no sense. It's one of those two.
The way it's cut, it seems very intentional to me, because you see she kills Scott and then it cuts right to Professor X going, "Oh, we must go to Alkali Lake."
Yeah.
So that strikes me as very intentional. But
some good X-Men action scenes in this movie though. Obviously there's the Magneto moving the bridge. That's great.
There's the quintessential Logan running through the woods, striking people with his claws bit. That's even in Logan.
Yes. And then Logan getting like fucking owned by Magneto, which is a thing you have to do whenever Logan and Magneto are in a movie together. Let's see. The scene
all the
where
shit towards the end is kind of a mess, but when Magneto actually moves the Golden Gate Bridge, it's pretty cool.
the scene where the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants comes in to rescue Mystique, I enjoy that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Mind you, it takes a turn there at the end.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Juggernaut? I don't really know a lot about him. I usually see him fighting the Hulk, and when he fights the Hulk, he doesn't do much except roar.
Right. Well, obviously, one thing that they changed in this movie, and I totally understand why I would have changed it too. It's a whole lot of backstory to try and get into. The Juggernaut's not a mutant in the comics,
which is bizarre because he's still Charles Xavier's brother.
Yeah, well, it's like a half-brother situation.
Well, because it's mystical, right? The armor is what does it.
Well, no, see, there's this thing where like he found a gem in a cave, and it like granted him these mystical powers where once he starts running, it's like momentum and bullshit, and like this sort of force field of energy comes around him, and like he just
where he had mutant blood though later.
I'm not sure. It's a long, confusing continuity. You think the movie continuity makes no sense? Go read up on some X-Men sometime. But yeah, I would have changed that too.
I mean definitely in the Ultimate version, I think they made him a mutant.
I've never liked the original Juggernaut origin story. I think it overcomplicates things. It would have been like, because the great thing about the whole X-Men thing is you can just be like, oh, the mutant.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go into like some weird backstory for everybody got their powers.
They needed to make it more clear that his strength, his big bulkiness and durability comes from his mutant ability though, because they don't make that clear in this version.
Yeah.
He's just sort of a big guy who can run fast.
I think they got his personality right, though.
Yes, although he's a lot more of just a primal animal in the comics. Again, usually when I see him, he's fighting the Hulk, and he's just sort of roaring.
Yeah. Well, that's what you do when you're fighting the Hulk, right? I mean...
That's true. But I've also seen him fighting Spider-Man, and he's usually just growling and taunting him.
He's just sort of a big, dumb meathead, and he hates Charles because they got beef, and well, that's in the comics. They don't go into that here, but that's him, and then they did that. I especially like the scene where he's chasing after Kitty Pryde, though. That's fucking great. He has the best line in the movie when he's like, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch."
It's pretty dumb, though.
Well, of course it's dumb.
It's all right though.
But it's cool. It's dumb and cool.
Well, I think we should start moving on to X-Men Origins. So what else did you want to say about X3?
That's it, man. I mean, cut out the Phoenix plot. That instantly would make it a lot better to me. Just do the whole cure thing.
I think it's fine.
Maybe save Phoenix for an X-Men 4, But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's nearly as bad as everybody kind of looks back on it as. I think there's definitely a part of the movie. There's a certain turn that happens where the quality goes downhill drastically. That also happens in X-Men Origins Wolverine 2, which is even more drastic. But it's it's close, man, and I don't think it's even as bad as the other like bad comic book sequels of the time. It's not as bad as a Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, or even Spider-Man 3. I don't think it's as bad as Spider-Man 3, just because.
Although if I was gonna watch them, no, yeah, you're right. I would say that Fantastic Four 2 is more fun. Like it's just more sort of like harmless, just nonsense.
Yeah, that movie pisses me off on a level that I cannot express.
Because of Galactus?
Not a fucking cloud.
That's at the end though. Like all the shit before that is just sort of like, eh. I don't. But I mean, this is totally a better movie though. Like this is a more, like there's more to this.
Yeah. So a lot of people at the time were like, "Oh, this has killed the X-Men franchise." Oh boy, they had no idea. They had no idea.
This is fine. I think this is perfectly fine. It's disappointing, but I think it's entertaining enough. It's got a lot of good shit in it. And it's well made enough, especially compared to what came after. Like it's really well made compared to X-Men Origins. That's one thing that really kills X-Men Origins. That this movie's got the production values and it's got a decent enough script that I think it gets by fine.
You know what? It had a tough act to follow. Also, let's be fair. X2 is one of the great comic book movies of the time, and still sort of one of the big examples of what you can do with this franchise. So it had a tough act to follow. And,
I think it's consistent enough with the other two movies, though, that it didn't have this massive drop in quality that I think a lot of people describe and set this movie up as having. That again, this was the first. I think I mentioned this is the first time I've ever seen this movie. So
I think you could even make an argument, and I'm not sure which side I would wind up being on. You could argue which one is better or worse between this and even the first X-Men movie, because the first X-Men movie is so prototypey.
No, but I think the first X-Men movie has less shit going on, so it's just it's a little more. It's just a little more enjoyable.
Yeah, it has a much tighter plot, and ultimately, I would give it to X-Men 1 for that reason. But it's also kind of prototypey.
It's also a little more. I mean, it could be a little more boring.
Perhaps, yeah. There's always shit going on in this movie. That's one thing to give it.
Yes, so maybe on that level, it might actually be more entertaining. But yeah, from a production standpoint, the first one is definitely better. But I would have to say, I think it's better than Ghostbusters 2. I know, but I think I would have to say that.
All right. Well, that is for anybody who doesn't know Bill personally, that is quite the recommendation.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who's never seen X3, maybe you've seen some of the other X-Men movies and you just avoided X3 because everybody told you it was
that was me prior to watching it for this podcast rather.
It's not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be.
It's totally worth watching.
I think
Kelsey Grammer's Beast alone.
Oh yeah, Kelsey Grammer is great as the Beast. That's the thing, is there's a lot of good performances in it. I mean, obviously you've still got Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. You've got Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart bringing all of their chops. You've got your Kelsey Grammer as Beast. A lot of good shit in that regard. So, yeah.
All right, Dylan, come on, let's get the other really crap one out of the way. All right, wow, where do we start with this one? So, okay, X-Men Origins Wolverine, 2009. I had a lot of excitement building up to this movie when I was a kid.
I will say, this is another example of a movie that that goes fine for a little while, and then there's a moment where it turns, and oh boy! And for me, it's the part that you actually are sitting there waiting to happen. It's the part where he gets the adamantium. Everything after that is just shit. And all the build up to that is pretty decent, I think.
I think the turn is when we jump into the present day. We jump into he's with his girl. Like, everything before that, I think is okay. I don't like the part where he's with the girl. I don't like the part where he's a lumberjack. I think all of that is garbage. Everything before that, I'm okay with.
I don't really like him with the girl either.
The Spec Ops stuff, I even don't think is that great. I think the stuff at the beginning is problematic, where it's the origin stuff. Have you read Origin? That's an important question I should ask. I haven't read Origin, so I can't criticize that on the level that it needs to be criticized.
You know, I haven't read Origin either.
But it simply doesn't work because it's completely unexplained. Like, I don't know what's going on there. Like, it happens, and then suddenly they're fighting wars for a country they don't live in. Like,
right. Well, here's the thing. Well, I don't know if I think America might actually be his home country. He kind of relocates to Canada, and then later on he loses his memory, and he just sort of.
They start out in Canada.
Is it at the beginning of the movie? Are they in Canada?
Yeah, it's actually kind of bullshit because it says 1845 Canadian territories, the Northwest Territories. There were no Northwest Territories in 1845.
Oh. Well, maybe the idea is that they immigrated, and years later they started serving in the wars, because by that point nobody remembered that they had come from Canada anyway.
So that's where the name Logan comes from, and whatever the hell fucking name. I think Vic keeps his name, which is weird.
Yeah.
But James starts calling himself Logan. You know, obviously since he can't keep his name James. Yeah. But I don't know, man. I was okay with I was okay with all the acting and the dialogue there, but I didn't understand what I was looking at.
Right. See, I don't really like the stuff with him and the girl either, but what kind of saves that part of the movie for me is fucking Sabretooth going around killing the people that used to be on the team with them.
Yeah, that's okay. I love the effect, man. That's good. That's really good.
I love that scene where he goes and kills the guy. I can't remember his name. He was in the Lord of the Rings movies. But the guy who can, like, flip on electronics with his mind and shit. It's like such a classic.
That was okay.
It's one of those classic scenes in cinema where, like, a guy you used to do some dirty shit with comes to kill you. And he's got that line where he's like, I always thought it would be Wade. And he's like, Wade's dead. And he fucking kills him. Like, that's great. I really like Liev Schreiber in this movie. He deserves a better Wolverine movie.
I don't know, man. All of that to me felt like super generic action movie nonsense, and that's what I think this movie falls apart in. It's all just superficial garbage, writing 101 Hollywood action movie nonsense, with some X-Men shit thrown in there to fill out all the runtime.
I kind of wish that they brought him back for Logan. Because I think he deserves to be in a good Wolverine movie.
Oh my god, I'm totally with you. I wish he would have been I wish he would have been X-24.
Yeah, that would have been great. You could have finally given him the adamantium, and then that would have been the fucking X-24 reveal. That would have been great. Because in this movie, Stryker's kind of dicking around with him the whole time. He's like, I'll give you the adamantium, and then he's like, I'm not going to give you the adamantium.
Does he have a healing factor? I guess he does, right?
Yeah, he has a healing factor like Wolverine. I don't think it's as pronounced, because that's why Stryker.
I think they're very clear about that in this movie, that it's not, and I think in the comics that's pretty clear. What are the good Sabretooth stories in the comics? Because they're not the ones that they're not the Wolverine comics I've read. Because he's not in the ones that I've read. Like, I've liked the ones I've read, but he's not in them. Like, what are the good Wolverines, the good Sabretooth stories?
Right. Shit, there's so many fucking X-Men stories. Yeah, I'm sure you can find a list on Google somewhere.
I'll Google it at a later date. That's a weird thing to just spring on you. I was just wondering if you'd read anything in particular that jumped out to you.
Yeah, I'm not bringing anything up off the tip of my head, but they've done interesting shit with him over the years. I mean, he's Wolverine's rival.
He's his Joker, yeah.
And he kind of didn't get shit to do in the first X-Men movie, and they kind of redeemed that in this movie. That's like the one thing about this movie. Well, aside from being the one thing that I like really legitimately love in this movie is Liev Schreiber's Sabretooth. It's also the one thing in this movie that doesn't really gel continuity-wise with the other three movies, is that Sabretooth is just a completely different character.
Yeah, I mean, that's the massive
by an
thing.
actor and not a wrestler.
Yeah. He wanted to come back, too, the guy who played him in the first movie, but they could have made that work, no?
I don't know. I didn't see enough of him in the first movie to tell me if he had the acting chops to pull off some of the material in this. I mean,
probably not. That's why they did it.
Because Sabretooth and Wolverine have this sort of like Shakespearean brothers turned against each other thing going on in this movie, and I don't know if that other guy.
I don't understand it at all. I don't know why Logan sticks with him. He's a piece of shit.
Right. Well, it's one of those things.
And.
You know?
James didn't grow up with him. The only reason they have common ground is because they're both mutants. I think they should have had. Yeah, but that's fine. That makes sense for a little while. But I think they should have had Logan leave him like during the First World War or some early time, because I don't think they would have stuck together that long, given how shit Victor is and how well-rounded Logan is.
I think it makes enough sense because we don't see a whole lot of what happens over the span of time in between them running away from home and the First World War. Like, you know, they're off. They run off into the wilderness together. They have nothing, and then they have to depend on each other to survive. They would definitely develop a strong brotherly bond. And so later on in life, when Sabretooth starts developing his sadism,
Yeah, but
it would
I
take
think
a while for Wolverine to completely turn the other way. And I think the business that goes on in Africa is just the last straw.
They needed to develop that more then. I don't know, man. I think that there's too much stuff going on that doesn't get developed. Like, I don't think that they established that Victor didn't have that in him from the beginning that Wolverine was noticing. They needed to develop more clearly. They needed to just develop more clearly how Wolverine feels about it, because he only seems to not have a problem with it when he murders a whole bunch of people and then he murders a girlfriend.
Yeah. But I mean, he distanced himself from Sabretooth after that business in Africa.
Well,
and
obviously, yeah.
And even then, when Stryker came and told him that the people were being murdered, he wanted to know about Victor. He wanted to know if he had been killed.
Oh,
so, I mean,
right, because Stryker lied to him that he hadn't done anything about it yet. That Victor wasn't, that because he didn't know who was doing it. He didn't find out that Victor was the one who was killing the guys until he found him.
Yeah. Until he found, he sees those marks on the trees, and then he goes and he finds his wife or his girlfriend supposedly dead. Also, he finds a dead animal that very clearly was ripped apart by Victor.
Well, I think it was supposed to be a Wolverine, which doesn't make any sense because Logan doesn't think of that name until after the girl tells him the story, which is fucking stupid. I get it, but it's dumb.
Is it supposed to be a Wolverine? I didn't
looked
notice.
Like a Wolverine to me. It could be anything else. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that was the implication. But again, I didn't get the sense that he was calling himself that until after the girl tells him the stupid story.
He definitely wasn't. He picks up that name in this movie when he asked him to make him new dog tags.
Which was also stupid because he's laying on the table. They make him the dog tags and they put him back on him when he's still laying on the table. I guess time passed and he got off the table in between that time, but it looks like he didn't move, like since they made him the new dog tags.
Yeah. Again, that means the turning point in the movie when he actually goes in to get the procedure. That's the thing that you sit there the first time you see this movie waiting to happen, like, oh, he's going to get his claws. And then after that, like, oh, this is really shit now. Like, before it was just kind of middle of the road shit, but now it's like shit. Like,
that's the bit where it feels like dumb, cliche, any old superhero origin where he ends up in that old fucking folks place in the country, and he's playing with the new claws in the bathroom. And it's like this big joke. It's like he just got like horribly experimented on by the government. Like he should be like a raging animal in the wilderness, killing animals and shit.
Interesting parallel though between what happens to that old couple and then what happens to the black family in Logan.
Yeah, and there is that nice bit where Zero says, "That's the funny thing, Logan. Innocent people keep dying around you." I like that. See, there's good shit in this really bad movie.
And then Logan kills him in a terrible CG explosion.
But yeah, that's my whole thing, though. And he walks away from it and doesn't look at it. This movie has okay stuff in it, surrounded by shit.
Yeah.
And also, the shit
How is it possible that the claws in this 2009 movie look worse than they did in any of the previous 3 X-Men movies? How does that happen?
There's that really bad close-up on them when they're clanging together in the bathroom, and that's the moment where I stopped taking the movie seriously. The bone claws looked fine, like that was all fine, like that was all good practical. But then they started doing the CG adamantium, and it looks like shit.
Which I think there was a mix of CG and practical in the first 3 movies.
They're
obviously
mostly
they had
practical though because he has gloves on most of the time.
Right, and they just have to use the CG for him actually pulling them out. Or in the scenes early on in the bar where he's like fighting people and he doesn't have gloves on and he just pulls out the CG claws, like when he threatens that guy.
And that doesn't look as good, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I get it. Which brings up the question why they didn't
should do practical with his hands though. They did that in Logan. Like most of the time in Logan when he's got the claws out, they're practical.
Yeah, I guess that's the reason. I guess they figured, oh, he's not going to be wearing gloves in this movie. He's going to be fucking walking around in a wife beater most of it. So I guess we got to fucking do CG
They
claws.
didn't
I
have
guess
to
that was
though.
right. They didn't, but I think that was probably their thought process.
They're
I think they looked
idiots.
at I think they looked at the first three movies and they said, okay, so they're CG when there's no gloves, and they're practical when there are gloves. Well, we're not going to have any gloves, so I guess they'll just be CG the whole time. You know what I mean? Like it's a stupid, simple way of looking at it, but I think that was probably what happened. Um,
Mm, mm. Yeah, no, I didn't like any of that at all. How'd you feel about him going to the old folks' place? I mean, yeah, again, it's kind of cool that Logan paralleled that, but the fact that they do it in this movie, I don't know, it feels really pointless. And again, the movie just has there's zero story here. Like it just it's a series of Logan just sort of meandering around. Like there's all this okay setup at the beginning and then it goes nowhere. And as an origin story for Wolverine, man, is this garbage.
yeah. Ultimately, that's
The whole, I mean, the whole Weapon X stuff. Oh, what a mess! And
yeah,
what a just boring, nothing, non-start of an event. He runs out, is totally cognitive of everything. They don't really do anything to him in terms of fucking with his memory or taking control of him. Like he just sort of goes through a bad spa treatment and then he runs away.
Also a lot of another problem with this movie is that they waste a lot of really great comic book characters.
I liked Will.i.am as the teleporting dude.
Will.i.am was pretty good, but I mean, look at the Blob in this movie. He's kind of wasted.
Oh
You see
yeah,
him at
that
the
was
beginning.
weird. I didn't like that at all.
You see him at the beginning of the movie, but he's not fat yet. And then in the middle of the movie, he comes back and he's only in it for like a couple minutes. I'm like, that's what you do
For
with the
no
Blob.
reason whatsoever. I didn't understand why he was there. I forgot why he knew where the island was. Like that all just totally I phased out. Like I lost the movie at that point. I didn't finish it rewatching it for this because at that point I was like I lost interest and I had to go do stuff that was more important. So I made a
Like,
judgment call at that point that I remembered the rest of it well enough.
because the Blob he's a fucking like first generation X-Men villain. Like the first team fought him back in the day. Like he's an important deal to the history, and they're just like, I'll be in the movie for 5 minutes.
Here's another thing that really kills this movie.
Also, Gambit is wasted. Why is he even in the movie? They didn't need him for that.
Yeah, that was pointless. But more than that, that feels like just set up to get him like, oh, we're gonna do something with him later. We're gonna give him his own movie. That was the idea. So that's why they did it. But it totally feels like set up for that.
The plan back in the day, I was still reading Entertainment Weekly at the time, which I still would if I still had a subscription because I did enjoy that magazine. But the plan back in the day was that they were done with the X-Men trilogy and they were going to do more origin movies for different characters. Like one of the ones that I heard them talk about was a Magneto Origins. And then when this movie wound up being dog shit, I was like, oh man, now we'll never get that Magneto origin movie. Thankfully, they kind of did that in First Class. Like that's a big part of that movie is Magneto's origin, so that was nice. But so yeah, the plan was there were going to be more X-Men Origins movies, and it would be like X-Men Origins Cyclops, which we kind of get a little bit of in this movie, or X-Men Origins.
That was another pointless fucking garbage thing.
Yeah, why is he in the movie? Agent Zero is wasted in the movie.
That's also dumb. Like they should have cut that out. They should have cut Xavier being there out. That's all really dumb, forced prequel shit.
Also, I mean, do we even have to talk about Deadpool? What they did to Deadpool in this movie?
He's fine before they put the costume on him. He's a little PC. I mean, very much so. He's super watered down, but he's still okay as Deadpool.
But I mean, in that first scene where he's, just Wade Wilson, you can see, like, oh yeah, Ryan Reynolds is the perfect actor.
Yeah, he's got it. He's totally got it.
And at the end of the movie, they sew his fucking mouth shut. The merc with a mouth has no mouth.
I mean, it doesn't help that aesthetically this movie is dog shit, and it just looks like garbage throughout, and the whole third act is just a mess of bad CGI, and Deadpool admits the worst of it. He looks like total shit.
And then he doesn't have swords. They turned him into Baraka. And they gave him laser eye powers from Cyclops, but they don't even work the same way as Cyclops' laser eye powers.
It's one of the worst things done with a supervillain, just a character in a superhero movie in the entire history of the genre.
The only good thing about it is that it kind of gives us a better explanation for Deadpool being able to teleport. And in the comics he uses like a device to teleport around. It's not actually one of his powers, so they kind of simplified that element. But I didn't need
I
that.
did not know that Deadpool could do that. Okay.
But I didn't need that if it had to come with all this other bullshit.
Yeah, they don't do that in the Deadpool movie.
No, they don't do the teleportation in the Deadpool movie. But there's a character that you see in the Deadpool movie. I don't remember who it is. Is it T.J. Miller? Maybe it's T.J. There's somebody in the comics who's kind of like his tech guy, and he creates a device that Deadpool then uses to like teleport around. If you've ever played the game Marvel Ultimate Alliance, you can teleport with Deadpool in that game. That's why.
But it's all garbage, man. Like all of that, it's all garbage.
And they fucking tease you with it too. They fucking have all this dialogue about, wait, if you didn't have that mouth on you, you'd be the perfect soldier. And then later on in the movie, they sew his mouth shut. It's just a big middle finger to the audience.
It would have been more. He would have been better suited to have had just a little cameo later on, where in the Weapon X program, it's revealed that he's got cancer, and then he's also volunteered for it, and it's gone bad. Because that's his origin in the comics. Like that's all they should have done with him. And like. Then, like, Logan is then forced into his procedure.
Right. They also don't get into Department H in this movie. They kind of simplify everything by just making it all Stryker's deal, which they had also previously done in X2, so that's just them working with previously.
Yes, so that's the thing. Like, they change it from the comics, because obviously Stryker had nothing to do with fucking Weapon X in the comics. Like, that was all its own separate thing. That was part of the Super Soldier program.
Department H, and there's this fucking evil scientist whose name I don't remember, but, like...
They're vague about calling him something in the comics because he's supposed to be up and secretive. But the guy who actually performed the procedure is a fat guy named Professor Cornelius. He's in the background of this movie. He doesn't get much to say or do, but he's the guy with the beard.
Right, and then there's
Stryker and Hines. Hines is her name.
Hines, that's it. Hines and Cornelius, yeah.
And then fucking Stryker is filling in the role of the bald dude with the glasses. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was something, again, that had previously been done in X2, giving all that to Stryker.
That was fine. I had no problem with that. No, that's not the problem. The problem is they just did it as shit. Logan volunteering for it is dumb. Again, it's like stupid comic book fucking dumb movie tropes. Like that, like it's what writers think comic books are like. It's like, I'm not saying that this is dumb in comics. I'm saying this is dumb when people translate comics, because this is just a person who doesn't read comics, or they haven't read comics since they were a kid, and they're just sort of like generically thinking of, oh, what do people know superheroes are like? Oh, I know. They volunteer to better themselves for some personal reason and gain to get their powers. So that's why they do it with Wolverine. Instead of like, oh, he got drunk one night, they drugged him, and then he fucking got forced into a program because they think that he's an animal.
Yeah, he gets fucking kidnapped and his memory's wiped. Like, it's way more tragic.
In the comics, he is not the protagonist of that book. He is, like, the scientific experiment. Right. Like, he barely talks in it except in the first issue, and then the rest of it is about the scientist who experiments on him.
He's a fucking Frankenstein monster in that. It's great.
It's awesome, yes. But in this, it's a generic superhero action movie.
The worst part about not doing it the way it was done in the comics is we don't get to have that great moment when he wakes up and like goes on a killing massacre.
Well, that happens a couple times.
They do that later on though in Apocalypse, so that was good.
Yeah, they've corrected a lot of the Weapon X stuff with Apocalypse and with what's sort of just implied in Logan.
Yeah, which Apocalypse, not a great movie, but not nearly as bad as this movie. So I'll take it.
Because in this, at least it's still like what Stryker is planning to do to him is exactly the same as the comics. I mean, he just wants to turn him into the ultimate weapon.
Yeah.
And then once it goes bad, there's a whole bunch of shit they're going to do with him later.
And I don't understand why they need Wolverine at all. Like, Stryker's main goal in this movie would be to create Weapon 11.
To get his healing factor.
Why even... Okay, so that's the idea. They're taking some of Wolverine's DNA to give the healing factor to Deadpool. Is that the idea?
Yes, seemingly so.
Well, then they could have just fucking did it like in the comics. Fucking kidnapped him, took his DNA.
I agree with you. I wish they would have done that. Here's my question: What was Deadpool's mutant ability before he got the healing factor? Because in the comics, he's not a mutant, and in the Deadpool movie, Wade Wilson is not a mutant until he gets the experiment.
Right. He
What
definitely
was
must have
Deadpool?
something.
Well, he's on
He
the
must have.
mutant task force, so obviously he's got some sort of power. Obviously, it's not the healing factor, because then otherwise, what is the point of Wolverine? So, what is Deadpool's power? Is he just good with swords? Like, I don't understand.
Well, the way he was deflecting those bullets makes me think he must have some sort of like general sort of Captain America-y thing going on. Enhanced reflexes and agility and shit.
Yes, and they give him that in Deadpool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that must be it. He's
I
just like
guess.
he's just like a slightly weaker version of Captain America with like samurai swords, and then they turn him into like this fucking Baraka. They even tease you because when he uses his laser eye power bullshit in this movie, the fucking the skin around his eyes turns black, and you get like the diamond pattern from his mask in the comics. Like, fuck you guys.
Right, well, they tried to sort of approximate the costume in a really dumb way. It's garbage, like I said. Also, I hate Sabretooth and Wolverine teaming up towards the end. Ugh.
Yeah, I don't buy it. Sabretooth just has that line where he's like, nobody gets to kill you except me. I'm like, fuck you. Let him kill him. You fucking idiot.
Or he should just run away. Like that. Like there's no way they would have teamed up. That was stupid. That was so stupid.
No,
Also,
they should have had.
Hugh Jackman is so hindered by how bad the script is because he's like greatly delivering this awful dialogue.
If they wanted to have Sabretooth interrupt the fight because he wants to be the one to kill Wolverine, fine. It shouldn't have been him and Wolverine teaming up and fighting Deadpool. It should have been him fucking kicking Deadpool off that thing, and then him and Wolverine scuffle for a little bit, and then Deadpool comes back. You know what? Like, it should have been more of a competition between the two of them to see who was going to kill Wolverine, not, I'm going to help you fight this thing because Stryker's a dickhead. Like,
I mean, all the stuff towards the end is just super forced, too. Like, when he gets shot in the head with the adamantium bullet so he doesn't lose his memories, but that doesn't kill him.
yeah.
Okay. That's dumb, right? Like, that is the dumbest thing ever. Fucking the girl? The girl! Ugh!
I guess the idea must be that that adamantium bullet in this movie is of a much smaller caliber than the one used in Logan.
Yeah, but that's where he gets it from. That's the sense I got. Yeah, I got the sense that he got that from Stryker in this movie. I thought that bullet was one of the only references to X-Men Origins that's in that movie. Because even though it ignores it mostly, it is still technically a sequel to it.
That must not be the case, though, because in this movie, the bullet just damages his brain, and in that movie, it blows X-24's fucking head off.
I agree with you, but in this movie, they play it up that it should be able to kill him.
And they never, well, no, they don't, because the other scientists, see, this is why you should have watched the third act again, Bill. This other scientist on 3 Mile Island comes into the room, and Stryker is loading the gun. And she says, you can't kill him even with that, he'll just heal. And then Stryker says his memories won't grow back, and then he goes out with the fucking gun.
All right, my bad. Maybe I should have rewatched that part then. I didn't want to though. Because here's the thing. I know this movie like the back of my hands, and whenever I watch it, I always just think back to my first viewing experience. You want to know why?
Why?
Because when I first watched it, it was the unfinished version that got leaked.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I didn't even see this movie in theaters. I saw it later on when it hit home video.
I saw it first when it leaked, months beforehand, because I was really excited about it. I liked Wolverine a lot, even though I wasn't a big X-Men guy, and I was really excited about it.
Everybody likes Wolverine, regardless of whether or not they like the X-Men. That's like a common thing.
And saw that, and I was like, oh, this is all right. And even though all the special effects weren't done, but man, it was traumatic for me because I found out things about the movie industry that I didn't want to know, things that were CGI that I was like, why is that CGI? Like the movie was like a quarter finished. It was nuts. Yeah. The whole opening doesn't work. But the problem is the movie itself, the special effects are so dog shit. Like all the CGI is subpar to me. Like it all looks like shit. And maybe it's because I just remember that experience of seeing all like the pre-rendered sequences, but it doesn't come together for me even in the finished product. It's all super unconvincing and cheesy to me.
For me, the only thing that looks fine is the opening credits where you see him and Sabretooth going through all the wars.
That's right. They shoot it like shit. I don't like the slow motion and like the freeze frames. It makes it look really cheesy. because they're in all like these dumb poses and they're like flying around on wires and shit, not using the guns that they're holding.
Yeah. So you remember the deal with the chick, right? Her mutant powers and shit.
There's some okay stuff with that. Like, I like the moment where Logan gets in the car after he has the kerfuffle with the dumb Canadian dude in the road. And she's like, and he's like, oh, do your powers of persuasion work on me? Like, flirting, like he doesn't know she's a mutant at that point. And she goes, did you stay in the car? And I'm like, oh, okay. So later on when they reveal that, they imply that she hasn't been controlling him.
Right.
That this has all been that this has all been genuine on his part.
Yeah, that is one good thing about it, is that they do foreshadow all of that pretty competently.
It's still really dumb.
It's explained that what she has is tacto-hypnosis, which means she can only influence people when she's making physical contact with them. So, Logan got out of the car even though she asked him not to, but she wasn't touching him at that moment. And then if you notice, when she gets out of the car and comes over to break up the fight between him and the other guy, she puts her hand on both of their shoulders.
Right.
And then later on at the end of the movie, when she forces Stryker to walk, she grabs him by the leg right before he shoots her in the head. And I'm like, why did you go that close to her when you know she has this mutant power? You fucking idiot.
Yeah, it was his idea in the first place to insert her, yeah. I just think that's a super cliched reveal, though. No? Like, that's just super stupid.
Yeah. Oh, I did like there was one really nice continuity nod to X2 in this movie. Well, first of all, the lab is very similar to what we saw in X2, but there's a great little continuity nod when they're on 3 Mile Island where you actually see Jason, Stryker's son, in like a freezer.
Okay, I don't remember that.
That was a nice little nod. You know, he has the non-matching eyes. Those always give it away.
Oh, I vaguely remember that, actually.
But yeah, so movie's pretty bad.
Yeah.
We came into this saying we're going to ask the question, which one's worse? And this one's definitely worse.
Oh, sure. Yeah, man, let's wrap up. I don't really have much else to drag this out with pain for.
To be honest, I had forgotten how generally just okay X3 is until I rewatched it again this time. And I was like, oh yeah, X-Men Origins Wolverine is definitely worse. There's just one element of it that I think is really good, and that's Lee Schreiber. I like him as Sabretooth. Other than that, God, why?
X3, I think, is a fine film. It's just disappointing in the third act. This movie, it's really generic and just sort of and painfully bland for the first 2 acts. And then in the third act, it's this killer, cheesy, Mystery Science Theater-worthy mess.
Yes, Mystery Science Theater should do this movie.
Well, they did it on Riff Tracks, but I would love to see them tackle it on the proper MST3K. I would love to see them do some actual proper superhero movies. I wonder if they could ever get the rights to them. Excuse me, Logan.
Can you imagine fucking Jonah in the box?
Properly, my cat Logan just tried to scratch me.
You imagine them fucking doing like Silver Surfer or some shit on that show.
Oh my god, I would love it. I would not. Surfer's not. I would want them to do like the '90 Captain America movie. That's more in their wheelhouse.
Which, by the way, what the fuck, Netflix? One hell of a cliffhanger at the end of that season. Jesus.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. All right, D.
Oh god. Anyway.
So X-Men Origins is definitely worse than Ghostbusters 2 for me. I have more nostalgia for it and more warm and fuzzy memories about it than I do X3. I remember playing the video game and loving that. That was an awesome game. Ugh. Did you play that?
I played a demo once.
You bitch. You missed X-Men Origins, the M-rated PS3 game, because you never had a PS3.
Right. Exactly.
Amazing game. So fun. I mean, it was basically a God of War clone, but with M-rated fucking Wolverine combat, but it was great. Hugh Jackman played Wolverine. The great thing about it was they designed, and it was more faithful to the comics. Like, it only sort of vaguely ties into the movie. It's very comic book. They were designing
the movie
it.
Only vaguely ties. Oh.
They were designing it before the movie was even a thing. So the story is a lot more complicated. The story is a lot more complicated and a lot more like the comics.
It sounds like how fucking back around the time that X2 came out, they came out with Wolverine's Revenge, and that was more of a comic book game than it was based on the movie at all. Like, they borrowed, like, costumes and shit from the movies. So it was like a weird amalgamation of the two.
Oh, and also they set up that Nightcrawler is the son of Mystique and what's his name?
Azazel.
Azazel, yeah. That they show that in the game. But anyway,
they teased that in First Class.
Oh, did they show Azazel in First Class?
Azazel is a character in First Class. He's one of the Hellfire Club.
It's awesome.
Which are the villains of the movie. He's one of fucking Kevin Bacon's minions.
Oh, I had no idea. I haven't seen that yet. But just to wrap up, I hadn't seen...
Oh my god. There is a great Azazel scene in that movie. Oh god, wait till you see that shit.
That's next, right?
Anyway. Yeah. Like, he's kind of a nothing character in that movie. He's just a henchman, but he does some really cool shit with the teleportation powers. Anyway, so yeah, next time we're going to get into... a lot of people thought that the franchise was dead after X-Men Origins Wolverine, and then I don't blame them for thinking that. But they managed to pull it out 2 years later, because next time we're going to be talking about 2011's X-Men First Class, which is considered by many to be like the best movie in the franchise. I kind of go back and forth on it, but it's definitely top tier. So get ready for that, everybody.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it, so I'm definitely excited.
Right, this will be your first time seeing First Class.
This was my first time watching X3, remember, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. I was like, wow, I really enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. I enjoyed more of this than I didn't like. And then X-Men Origins, I hated everything.
But you saw Days of Future Past, right?
Yes.
So wow, that's a weird place to jump on with the younger cast. All right.
It made perfect sense to me. I was able to put it together. And then I didn't see Apocalypse, I saw Deadpool, and then I saw Logan. So I'm all over the map with my X-Men knowledge. Like, all I've read of the comics is exclusively Wolverine stuff.
Well, now there's only 2 movies left that you haven't seen, man.
Yeah, First Class and Apocalypse. Everything else I've seen. So we'll get into those. We'll get into those in the future. Sooner rather than later. Don't you worry. Oh, and the Wolverine I also haven't seen.
Oh, that's right, the Wolverine. I always forget about that movie.
Me too.
I guess because it doesn't have the X title on it.
Yes. That movie kind of bombed, didn't it?
Yeah, it had kind of mixed reactions. I mean, I like it. I mean, it's a fine Wolverine movie. It's the same guy who did Logan, and he's working with a PG-13. And then you watch that movie. Back in the day, I would watch that movie, and I think, God, I wish this guy had an R rating. And then fucking this year, he finally got one, and we all saw what happened. But
there's an unrated version of that movie.
Similar. Of what? The Wolverine?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
If I find it, can we review that version?
Sure, because I mean, if you find that, then
then you can tell me what's different.
Because when we get around to Future Past, I definitely do want to talk about both cuts of that, just because I haven't seen the road cut yet.
Yeah, me neither. So I'm just gonna watch the road cut though, because I'm not gonna watch them. I'm not gonna watch it twice. So I'll just watch the unrated version then of the Wolverine, because I'm not gonna watch the prissy PG-13 version if I don't have to.
Right, if you can find it, and if there's like a link to it, you can give me, because I mean, the one that I have
I'll
is
rent
the
it.
fucking...
I'll rent it on YouTube if I have to. But obviously you can't do that, so we'll figure it out. But this is all stuff we should be talking about off recording. So we hope you enjoyed this review of X3: The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. We certainly had a good time doing it. But next time we're going to be doing a typical science episode. We haven't done one in well, it's been only 2 episodes, but we have a whole bunch of shit saved up. There's a whole bunch of scientific discoveries that need to be discussed, and we will make some advancements in the field of science next week when we see you then. So, until next time, everyone, I'm Bill Worster, aka Zazubaar.
And I'm Super DM64.
Reminding you that you see nothing, Colonel Hogan.